Hey everyone, I'm back with another Neural DSP Quad Cortex focused video. Last week I posted a video of me powering this setup and two wireless units using this fine power supply from Cioks, the DC7, and I've gotten a few comments and questions on, well, how do you do that? How is it possible? So I'm gonna address that, and I'm also gonna address the foot switch that I'm using to change between the different patches, as well as, engage the tuner and also engage gig view, which is really nifty. So I'm gonna address that as well in this video. I'm using my Yamaha Attitude Limited 3 bass in this video, in case you're wondering. But if you've followed my channel, you probably know all about this bass already. So I'm gonna address the power supply, I'm gonna address the MIDI foot switch, and I'm also gonna address why I've got this pedal board set up the way that I've got it. So first up, let's start off with the DC7 and how you hook it up to the Quad Cortex. So to get this wonderful power supply to work, you need not one, not two, but three parallel flex cables from Cioks. You need to set 4 of the outputs to 12 volts. That will give you 500 milliamps, which is not sufficient on its own. However, if you use these fine parallel cables, you can combine the milliamps of these outputs. So you need to combine 4 of the outputs using 2 parallel flex cables, and then you sum those into 1 using the third parallel flex cable, and then you run that one into the Quad Cortex. As you can see, the unit is working at 40% as of now, and all of these pedals are hooked up to the unit as I'm filming this. The Suncoast BC3 XL is also a pretty thirsty gal. I think it requires around 800 milliamps or so to work. This one, the EBS, is not as thirsty, but it's there nonetheless. The power supply is actually being pushed, but it's not even breaking a sweat. It's not even at 70%. When I was using the two wireless units, the two G70s from line 6, I used the 24-volt DC output and ran it to my Strymon OJ, which powered those two units, and when I had those two engaged as well, it actually went up to 70%. However, those take about 500 milliamps each to work properly, so that is quite a lot of load on this power supply, and like I said, it went to 70%, not 90%, which is nice. So 3 parallel flex cables and you're good to go with the Quad Cortex. Next up, you might wonder why I've built this pedal board with the Quad Cortex and 2 additional pedals, and I'm gonna address that now. As you can see here on the grid, the signal flow that we got going is pretty extensive, and it features both the signal going to the output 3 and 4, which are going to my EBS Classic 500 amp and 212 cabinet, which are just out of camera. And it also features signals being sent straight into Logic, which is essentially what you've been hearing all along. The signal that is going to the amp is essentially only getting some pretty aggressive high and low cut on the P pickup, and well, just some low cut on the woofer. Then I've got a noise gate added as well, and some effects. The effects are exactly the same for the signal that is going into Logic. For the signal that is going into Logic, I've actually got some cab simulation going to make it a bit smoother. I'm using the parametric EQ for the signal that is being sent to Logic through the XLR output. On the woofer channel, I've also got an amp engaged, and that is to give it some additional smoothness. Here is with it. And here is without it. So to my ears, it brings a bit of warmth and roundness to the tone. Most of the tone shaping is taking place within the Suncoast BC3 XL, but this helps, making it sound a bit warmer, if I may say so myself. Then we got a 810 cabinet going for the lowermost channel, and then some EQ. And it's the same here on the signal that is being sent to the amp. So the reason why these two pedals are being hooked up to the effects loop is that this signal flow is not entirely possible if you're using, say, neural captures. The neural captures are really close in terms of what you get in terms of tone. However, if I were to do a proper capture of this preamp, that would take up 3 blocks or rows. And as you can see, as of now, these 2 channels take up only 1 block, which allows me to do this separate routing thingy. Of course, you can always, pick and choose and do a capture that essentially features both channels, but I find that the separation is much better when you have them, well, separated. And also, the Suncoast has an amazing and wonderful limiter in it, which is currently engaged. I'm gonna show you what it does. So here's with the limiter. Here's without it. It's a pretty darn aggressive and great limiter, and to me it really makes the bass feel as if it's almost unplugged, when you're sitting in a quiet room and you can hear every little nuance of your playing. Well, that is what this limiter does to me and to my feelings, and those are my feelings, and no one else's, sorry. The ultimate Billy Sheehan signature drive is being used essentially as a tube screamer to give me some of that nasal and additional and wonderful aggression to my distorted tone. Here's with it. So yeah, it gives me some more aggression and a bit more nasal tone, which I find cuts really nicely through a mix. So, like I said, the reason why these 2 pedals are on this board is that this allows me to do this excessive signal routing, which is great when you're playing live, at least in my humble opinion, because now I don't need to have a cab block on the signal that is going to my amp. That works, I've been doing that, and it sounds fine. However, this sounds even better, and why settle for less than the exceptional, if you get what I'm saying. Plus, I love having access to the actual knobs of this preamp and, do some additional fine tweaking whenever that is needed. So that is why these 2 pedals are on this pedal board. So last but not least, let's address this MIDI foot switch that I'm using. It's the Harley Benton MP-100. And now, some of you are probably saying, well, this just proves that the Quad Cortex can't take a beating. He's afraid of having the Quad Cortex on stage and stepping on it. Well, let me put it this way. As you can see, this preamp is right here, which is where my foot would go if I were to step on the Quad Cortex, and I don't want to mash this one. Up here on the Quad Cortex are the outputs, which you need to get a sound. So this is the best arrangement I can think of when it comes to placing these pedals on this pedal board. So yeah, there's that. And second, what would you rather have someone spill beer in? Your pedal board that costs way too much, or a MIDI foot switch that costs around $100? I'm not saying that I'm throwing money around. Au contraire, I try not to. But if I were to play live, and this has happened on more than one occasion, that someone with good intent comes up to the front of the stage and looks at my pedal board and goes, "That is awesome, man," and almost spills a beer. you don't want that on your fancy schmancy pedalboard. But to lose one of these, it would be sad. I would be pissed. However, it's easier to replace this one than it is to replace all of this. So there is that. This is, as I said, the Harley Benton MP-1. This is a rebranding of the MIDI Commander, which came out, I think, last year or the year before that. It's really easy to program. As you can see down here, I've got a few different presets or scenes going. We got the distorted tone, got the clean tone, got some clean with a chorus. We got the lead, which is my attempt at the amazing band Raven's lead tone. Essentially, it's 2 octaves up and some delay and awesomeness. And we got the bulldozer, which is, just a sub octave to give me some more of that oomph whenever I need that. I've also got it set to engage gig view, which is nice, and to engage the tuner. This MIDI controller is really easy to program. It has a few caveats and downsides. If you ask me, you can only program it to send CC messages. You can't adjust, excuse my lack of correct terms, but you can't adjust the velocity of those CC, of those commands, so to speak. So, for instance, if you have a more advanced unit, you can actually program it to send CC with velocity messages down here, for instance, which would only trigger the scenes no matter what mode you're in. If I'm in, say, stomp mode, these buttons correspond to the buttons on the Cortex. So there is that small caveat with this unit. Other than that, I see no problem using it for myself. It is USB powered as of now, also through the DC7 from Cioks, which is great. I'm planning on using a pretty long USB cable running from the pedal board, which I will keep by my amp. And I've also got a long-ass MIDI cable, so this way I can have this one at the end of the stage where I'm at and leave my pedal board safely stowed away from drunken admirers, so to speak. Another downside of this unit is that these buttons don't light up when you step on them. I also would kind of like them to correspond to the Cortex, that, when you're on scene E, as it says on the Cortex, this button will also light up. It doesn't, and, why cry over that? It's a cheap and solid unit. It also runs on batteries in case you don't want to power it with USB. You can also charge the batteries if you got rechargeable batteries and you plug it into USB. So, for that, it's really nifty and handy. I use the MIDI commands that are in the Cortex manual, so it was really easy to program this one. And, if you want a somewhat cheap MIDI controller that you can keep at your side of the stage and not be too sad about it being lost to beers and spirits, well, there you go. The Harley Benton MP-1. Like I said, there are a few downsides to it, but overall, it's really nice, and it allows me to have the Cortex on a table and still being able to, change scenes with my feet. And, also engage the tuner. So there you have it. That's pretty much it for this video. I should also address that this pedalboard is the EBS Carry On pedalboard, which comes with a really nice bag. It is essentially just a flat tray with 2 handles, which is exactly what I wanted for this setup. Please pardon my messy cable arrangements. There are no live gigs for me to, have it sorted out for. So once those start rolling in again, whenever that is, I promise that I will tend to the cable arrangement of this pedalboard. I'm really happy, or I should say extremely happy, with the tones that I'm getting out of this setup. I love the distorted tone that I'm getting. I'm not gonna play more of that riff. The clean tone comes from me dialing down the output volume of the effects loop, which kind of induces some noise. I'm currently working, or a good friend of mine is currently working on a MIDI solution so that I can actually disengage the overdrive channel of the Suncoast. So there's that, but as a clean tone, it really works as of now, to my, at least in my humble opinion. And yeah, really happy with this setup, and really impressed with the Cioks DC7 and the Power 8 packs. So if you have any further questions on this setup or on the Quad Cortex or what have you, leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys and gals and cats and dogs in the next video. Until next time, take care. Bye.